Welcome back to Legitimate Targets, everybody. This is Jackson Hinkle, and we are here with a very special guest for episode number 14. Joining me today, I have Rabbi Yisroel Dovid Weiss. He is a rabbi, represents the Neturei Karta International Jews Against Zionism. We have I'm sure, a lively conversation ahead of us. So, Rabbi Weiss, thank you so much for joining me today. To start off with, I just wondered if you could explain to our audience and to me, why do you, as an Orthodox Jewish man, oppose and frankly you don't believe in the Zionist state of Israel?
First, with the help of the Almighty, I pray to the Almighty to bestow upon me His truth, His wisdom, that I may be worthy of conveying His message, and so, inshallah, sanctify His name, and inshallah, bring peace to the world. Amen. And assalamu alaikum. Greetings to everybody. My view that I will try to espouse, to explain here, is not a personal view. It is exactly as you said. It is the view of people who are of the Jewish faith, who made this covenant with God of Judaism to uphold the Torah. And because we've accepted to strictly adhere to this covenant, that automatically means that we are opposed to any concept of a so-called Jewish state, a nationalism, a concept of a nationalism to create a state, even if it would, hypothetically, it would be very religious people who are following the tenets of the Torah in other issues. But in actuality, of course, the ones who have this state are sinners, who are people who don't adhere to the laws of the Torah. It's a pure nationalism, a way of freeing themselves of this covenant that they made with God. They're only using the facade, the appearance of the Jewish religion. They're using the name Israel and using the symbols like the Star of David, but in actuality, it has nothing to do with the religion Judaism, and I will explain. Judaism, as I'm saying, is a covenant that we made 3,000 years ago on Mount Sinai, where we accepted to be subservient to God and follow the laws that He gave us, which was called the Torah, 613 commandments. The Bible, people know it as, but there's the Torah. And in that laws, those laws are totally encompassing our lives. Many of them pertain to how a Jew must uphold his closeness to God. For instance, we're not allowed to eat non-kosher. We're not allowed to work on the Sabbath, the seventh day of the week, because God created the world in 6 days. The seventh He rested. So the Sabbath, it's a very stringent part of Judaism that makes that we're not, a person, his whole life is involved around, a lot of his business, and he cannot work on the Sabbath. That's from Friday night till Saturday evening. And this is the basics of Judaism. This is the 10 Commandments. We're not allowed to steal. We're not allowed to kill. And Zionism is a movement, a political movement, a nationalist movement that started a mere 140 years ago or such in that area. And it is a transformation from this subservience to God, from this accepting of a covenant with God, into a base material nationalist concept of having a piece of land, of having a nationhood, a group of people creating their own sovereignty, their own national home. So it is diametrically opposite. It has nothing to do with this being subservient to God. And in fact, it is forbidden for Jews since the destruction of the temple 2,000 years ago, because Jews made the covenant, as I said, 3,000 years ago. Then God commanded us to go into the Holy Land, which was basically Palestine today. But then 2,000 years ago, and by that later, then they built the temple. King Solomon built the temple, but later it was destroyed, as we were warned by the prophets that if we're not on a very high level of spirituality, it will be destroyed. That came about, and since the destruction of the temple, we were expressly commanded by the Almighty that we are forbidden to reestablish, to make any type of Jewish sovereignty. And for 2,000, that happened since 2,000 years ago. And for this last 2,000 years, Jews who are true to the service of God, to accepting this covenant, to following the covenant, we never attempted to create any Jewish sovereignty, even 1 centimeter of Jewish sovereignty in any part of the world, because that is the decree of exile. God sent us into exile with the destruction of the temple, and we are expressly forbidden to reestablish any Jewish sovereignty, even if it would be a God-fearing type of sovereignty that follows the laws of Sabbath and kosher and so on. It would be forbidden for us, and therefore we never had such a Jewish state for the last 2,000 years. Now, the Zionists were non-religious people. When they decided to create the state, they just scorned and laughed at all these issues because they had nothing with God or the Torah. They were non-religious Jews. Theodor Herzl, Ben Gurion, Chaim Weizmann, Jabotinsky. So they were only interested in their national home. So they ignored all of that. And they decided to create the state. Now, they decided for convenience sake to create it in Palestine, rather than they wanted to make it in Uganda and some, a very lush land that would be practical for producing all the essence that people need. The problem, whether it is fruits, vegetables, animals to graze, and so forth. In those days, it was before technology. So they were thinking of Uganda and Patagonia and different places, but they decided for practicality that they will make it in Palestine. Why? Because they will be able to tell the world, this is the land that God gave us. And the Christians around the world, evangelistic Christians, certainly, they will stand and they will support the Jews, because that's in the Bible, it says the Jewish children that have the land. So they decided it would be more practical to create their country in Palestine. Now, even though Palestine was not such a lush land, it was undeveloped and it would need a lot of work. They figured it would still make sense to go there. But in order to accomplish this nationalism, it entailed to rather steal the land from the people that were living, the indigenous people. So you have over 500 villages and towns, and the people, the Palestinian people that were living there, and you're going to have to remove them from their homes. So that is a technical problem that the Zionists had, but they just looked at it as, unfortunately, as a technicality, and they went about the business of totally removing the Palestinian people from their homes, and as we see for the last 76 years what we're witnessing. So this flies in the face of what Judaism is. Judaism, again, is to be subservient to God, not to kill. It says in the Torah, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal. We're not allowed to steal, we're not allowed to kill, we're not allowed to have a Jewish state, even in an uninhabited land, and certainly not by killing or stealing. And also, on top of that, Jews are required to show gratitude, to express gratitude to people who have done good to the Jewish people. And we have that in the last 1,000 years. There was the Inquisition in Spain, there was the Spanish Inquisition, there was the Crusades, and the Jews were murdered and they were killed and thrown out of their homes and sent out of many lands, including England and many other lands. And where did the Jews find a home? They were embraced by the Arab and Muslim people, and we flourished amongst them. And Jews are required by God to express our appreciation, and therefore, so now when the Zionists are coming and they're declaring that Palestine is the land that God gave them, and it's their right to take it because it's godly given to them, and then the Palestinian people say, hey, why are you taking the homes from me? So they declare, and they tell the world that the Palestinian people and the Muslim people are anti-Semitic. They hate the Jews. So there could be nothing more vile disrespectful, repugnant, repulsive than, to take a people who are so kind to us, because it was the Muslims, the Arabs, and all the Muslim and Arab countries, and including the Ottoman Empire, which included Palestine, that we were embraced and given a home. So how dare these Zionists go, and in order to accomplish their goal of establishing a state, they have to tell the world, sell a narrative that the people who are opposing them are haters of Jews, and the reason they oppose their going to establish a state is not because they don't want their homes to, the Palestinian people, not because they don't want their homes to be stolen. It's simply because they hate Jews. So in every aspect, every facet of this Zionist creation of the state of Israel, it is totally in contradiction. It is antithetical to every concept of Judaism, and therefore all the rabbinical authorities from day one around the world oppose Zionism. So I'll show the picture always. Here you have a picture. I carry on with me some pictures. Here you see the Declaration of Independence, the most historic moment in Zionism, where you see Ben Gurion, the first prime minister, reading the Declaration of Independence in Independence Hall in 1948. Here you have the picture of Theodore Herzl on the wall with the Stars of David on the wall. And now, and you can look at the people who was about the dais. Instead of rabbis, you see people that aren't even covering their heads, which a Jew is required to cover the head to show that we believe that there's a God above us. And this is the dais, the most respectable of their representatives sitting at the dais at this historic moment instead of rabbis. So you can see the duplicity, the hypocrisy of them making a Jewish state, the Star of David declaring it's because God gave them the land, yet they don't have the rabbis sitting there because it's a total farce. It's not a Jewish state. It's a nationalist, selfish, flawed political entity. And the rabbis, as I say, like the rabbis in 1947, before they made the state, this is Rabbi Dushinsky, the chief rabbi of the Jewish community that was living in Palestine together with the Palestinian people, pleaded with the United Nations, and he said, we furthermore wish to express our definite opposition to a Jewish state in any part of Palestine. This was the representative, the true representative, this God-fearing person, the chief rabbi of the community there, pleading with the United Nations and saying that Jewish people and our communities do not want to establish this wicked, this illegal, illegitimate so-called Jewish state. And they were ignored. This is a year before it was created, 1947. And yet they were ignored, and they made the state. And since then, we have the rabbis in the tens and hundreds of thousands demonstrating in the streets of Jerusalem, in the streets in front of the in front of the White House, and in front of all over, whether it's in Jerusalem or all over. The ones who are true to religion stand and demonstrate and declare that it's not a Jewish state. So now you have, I think, more or less the picture why we oppose this occupation, and it hurts us to the core that this terrible crime, this genocide is being perpetrated not just by a people, but on people who are masquerading under the facade of my religion and claiming they're doing it because God allows them to do it.
Rabbi Weiss, you're one of many Orthodox Jewish people that opposes the Zionist state of Israel. There are many Orthodox Jews within Israel itself, the Zionist entity, who refuse to participate and flat out reject the state. They don't participate in the military, they don't participate in political life or the voting process. So how does Israel treat Orthodox Jewish people, religious Jews like yourself?
Well, like I say, the community, there was an actual Jewish community that resided in the Holy Land before Zionism came from Europe. Let's start with there. This Zionist movement that I pointed out to you, the Theodor Herzl, they came from Vienna, Austria. This whole movement, this political movement, this nationalist concept came from a group of sinners, of heretics, ones who detested the religion and did not uphold the religion. They came from Europe, and they became close with the leaders of England and so forth. The Balfour Declaration was supported by the English government. for this group of Zionists. But the communities that were the Jewish community that was residing in Palestine, they were very religious, God-fearing community, and they lived together with the Palestinian people as brothers and sisters in the same courtyards, babysat each other's children. They were living together, and they had no aspirations for creating a so-called Jewish state. On the contrary, as I said, their leaders pleaded with the United Nations. We have no desire to have such a rule over the land. And it's more than 76 years. Since 76 years is the state of Israel. But in the 20s, even the chief rabbi of Palestine at the time, in the 1920s, was Rabbi Sonnenfeld, met with the king of Transjordan and pleaded with him, and he said, and he put in the new Arab newspapers articles in Arabic, and said, we do not want the Jewish state. They were all opposed to it. And from then on, the Jewish communities daily stands and demonstrates. They get arrested because they refuse to serve in the mandatory Israeli Defense Force, mandatory service in their army. And they get, boys and girls are required to serve there, and they get arrested. And here you see the demonstrations on the streets that are ongoing. You can see children. It's unbelievable, but children, old men get beaten, get assassinated, and this is going on for 76 years. This is the army. We're never armed. The Jewish people living there in Al-Quds, in Jerusalem, and in occupied Palestine, they're not armed. We never could be accused of being armed. We don't carry guns. We don't carry knives. They're simply demonstrating, and they get brutally attacked, and the world is silent. It's scandalous. If this would happen in Italy, if it would happen in the US, it would happen in Canada, I mean, the first thing is the Israeli prime minister would be running and declaring anti-Semitism and demanding restitution for the state of Israel. But this is what's ongoing for 76 years. We are demonstrating, and the world is silent as if nothing is happening. They believe the Israeli government and their leaders that they know what they're doing, and nobody should mix into their affairs. And the ones who are opposing them are simply terrorists or something. Even though it is the most ridiculous thing to say, because, as I say, none of us are armed. We're God-fearing communities living in the streets of Jerusalem in the hundreds of thousands, and we demonstrate, and we will never accept the legitimacy of the existence of the state of Israel. Here, around the world, where you will find the very religious communities, whether they are living in the streets of Jerusalem, whether they are living in New York or in England, these pockets of areas where there's a very religious communities, invariably, the more the religious the community, the more vociferous, the more strongly and loudly they are opposing the existence of the state of Israel. Not only do they're pleading for a two-state, no, they're pleading for the removal of this rebellion against God and an impediment to peace. There's absolutely no condoning, no legitimate reason why this nationalist movement should have control over the land. Where do they get the right? It's not from God. They're simply frauds. They're counterfeiting the words of the Torah, and they're unfortunately being supported by the Western governments for whatever reason it may be. Maybe because the people have pity on the Jews for what we suffered in World War II, and they want to offer some type of a restitution, or maybe, but whatever it may be, it is unacceptable, and it's an insult both to our religion, and it's disrespecting our Torah authorities, the very respectable leaders of Judaism who are living around the world, the great rabbis and Torah authorities who are pleading with the world leaders that they should simply come to us. Just if you would want to say an opinion in Christianity, you will discuss the issue and you will go to the religious leaders of Christianity, and the same with Islam. And here, when they're dealing with Judaism, they're going to Netanyahu and to all these sinners and people who laugh at God's word of the Torah. They don't uphold the Torah, and to these people, they are going to hear the word of Judaism and to accept from them what is considered Judaism and what is considered anti-Semitism. And it's really it's absurd, and it's tragic, It's causing now tens and tens of thousands of people, over close to most probably 100,000 people who were murdered in the last year, well over 40,000 people. We don't know what the number is already that are murdered, that have been murdered by the Zionists with impunity. And we have 76 years of this ongoing a breach of justice.
Rabbi Weiss, I'm so just floored by everything you have to say, because it's the exact opposite of what the mainstream media tells us about Israel being this Jewish state. You know, something that I saw on an X account called Torah Judaism is that King Solomon he wrote a prophecy in Shir Hashirim warning the Jewish people not to try and establish Jewish sovereignty. He warned against trying to establish a Jewish state. So my question for you now is, where does this Zionist ideology even come from? I mean, we know the names, Ben Gurion, we know Herzl, Theodore Herzl, but where does it actually come from? And how long do you think that the Zionist entity will continue to exist? Will it last much longer into the future?
With the help of the Almighty, we put out another book called Traditional Torah Opposition to Zionism, where we have historical documents, both of the opposers of Zionism and the Zionist leaders. And Theodor Herzl, as you know, the father of Zionism, I'll just quote one of his statements, and so you'll get a simple idea of what we're dealing with. So Theodor Herzl wrote in his diary, the way, and I'm quoting him, diary page 14, he says, the way to solve the problem of anti-Semitism is to speak to the head priest of Vienna, to get an appointment with the Pope, to make a mass conversion of all the Jews of Austria to Catholicism. Now, again, the way to solve the problem of anti-Semitism is to make an appointment with the Pope, to make a mass conversion of all the Jews to Catholicism. It should be done on a Sunday in the middle of the day with music and pride publicly. We are the last generation that held on to the faith of our forefathers. The conversion will be in St. Stephen's Cathedral. Imagine this. If you're talking about somebody who's the hero, this great hero of Judaism, and of the Jewish people, read his words. He says that the Jews should convert out of their religion. Now, my grandparents were killed in Auschwitz. From the Crusades, the Inquisition, Jews were ready to give their lives proudly to be burnt at the stake rather than to forsake our religion. We believe our body serves our souls. We are here to serve God. Comes somebody who decides that Judaism is a nationalism, and he decides the practical issue is simply that we should all convert out of our religion. So I'm just saying, you're puzzled by the fact that why aren't they bothered by what King Solomon writes, that we're not allowed to create our own state once we're in exile. We're not allowed to have a Jewish state. Of course, he doesn't care. He has nothing with God. He says Jews should simply drop their religion. See, we're not dealing with people who reckon with the words of the Torah. We're dealing with people who drop God, and therefore they don't have these moral compass to lead them. So they're ready to actually do tricks and sacrifice on the altar of their goal anything that stands in its way, because they don't have morality of God. Therefore, thousands and tens of thousands of Palestinians die, and thousands of Jews, the ones who oppose them, they're beaten and killed, and even the ones who support them are dying simply because they have their selfish goal, which is impossible to actually achieve, to take over the whole land. You can't just kill millions of people, but it doesn't bother them that it's costing lives, because it's simply that they're ready to sacrifice on this altar of their ideology to achieve their goal. So that's what Zionism is. The words of the Torah, they scorn, they laugh. They always say to the religious Jews, when we meet them, we encounter Zionists, they say, where's God to protect you? They spew blasphemy. They laugh at us. They say, you turn to God to protect you. Where is God to protect you when we needed it, and so forth? And of course, we look at this as blasphemy. We don't question God. We don't question the way he rules the world. And, we don't understand his ways, but we consider God all compassionate, and we are true to his covenant. And that's what Judaism is. If you don't like it, Don't make a national home and call it Judaism when you on the other side of the coin you're spewing heresy, blasphemy, and claiming God is weak, and you can ignore the words of the Torah, and then as you turn a pious face to the United Nations and say, "Oh, God gave me the land," and that's why the rabbis around the world stood in total opposition to this. Now, the question you asked me was a two-part question. You asked me how come they're not reckoning, and it doesn't seem to bother them the fact what King Solomon says and what the Torah states. So that's the first part I answered. Now I forgot what the second part of the question was.
Yes, of course. The second part of the question was, do you think that the Zionist entity, Israel, can last much longer into the future, or do you think it'll cease to exist?
Well, with the help of the Almighty, I don't even have to look at the facts on the ground to know that it will not be successful, because we believe that God rules the world. And in His Torah, the Almighty writes, "Why are you rebelling against me?" I'm quoting the Torah. It says, "Why are you rebelling against me? It will not be successful." If somebody tries to rebel against God, it may look successful in the short term, but it will definitely not be successful in the long term, and it will end. I mean, even you look at the Roman Empire and the Greek Empire and many other powerful entities, and just like they disappeared. And you look at the different other things, even the USSR, which was one of the superpowers that we had just recently, and overnight it ended, and nobody would have believed that where they forbade any practice of religion, and it just disappeared basically. So this will end. Apartheid, you find that it was a totally criminal endeavor. It's that black people should be treated as second-class citizens, and yet it was recognized in the United Nations, respected. It was one of the nations officially of the United Nations. Their ambassador was always referred to as His Excellency Ambassador, so forth. While the ones who opposed this apartheid and pleaded with the United Nations that they should not support it, that they should stop its power, they were arrested, as Nelson Mandela sat 27 years in prison. So and was called a terrorist. You can find that the world powers can support and approve of and actually not only condone, but actually collude with and help and assist a power, a country that is based on criminality, that's doing something that is colossally wrong, like a degenerate, and that is what we are witnessing today. A genocide daily that is beyond words, that carried over now and from Gaza into Lebanon, and the world, the normal grassroots people around the world are witnessing this in horror and pleading with the world governments that they should do something about this. And many world governments would like to do something, but yet they're superpowers that are not permitting anybody to stand in the way of what this satanic occupation is. But that does not give that an aspect of legitimacy. It doesn't prove anything that it's legitimate. As I say, the perfect example is apartheid. Today, if somebody would want to create a country under the rules of apartheid, the United Nations would never accept it, and no world power would accept it, because it's ridiculous. Everybody would say it's abhorrent. Yet it did exist for so many tens of years, and it was only pushed out, well, we believe, because God, with His compassion, ended it. But it was the grassroots that forced the politicians and made them uncomfortable, and made them sanction and so forth, till eventually it was ended. And as I say today, it would never happen again with God's help. Now the same thing was with this terrible occupation. It may look today that it is fully legitimate. It's under the waving. It's the flags of one of the United Nations, but it is clearly a fraud. It is against the Torah. We put out a book called The Rabbis Speak Out. It is a compilation of all the major rabbis, 130-year record of religious Jewish opposition to Zionism. Remember, the Zionist state calls itself the State of Israel. They refer to themselves as the right to exist because God gave them the land. But all the Torah authorities, universally, from every part of the world, from the Middle East Africa to the European countries, 130 years. We're talking about well before the creation. I quote here one, a codifier of Jewish law who's very well known, and anybody who's a practitioner of Judaism. His name was Rabbi Yisroel Meir Cohen, the author of Chafetz Chaim, a very, very famous, as I say, codifier of Jewish law that everybody uses in the religious community. And he wrote, he passed away in 1933, that is 15 years before the state of Israel was ratified by the United Nations, but they were in full swing, Zionism. And he spoke about Zionism. He wrote, the Zionists are dead limbs of our people, which causes the entire body to rot. His student quotes him in Omer Ani Maaseh Melech. He says, the Zionists are dead limbs of our people, which causes the entire body to rot. In other words, it seems to be part of Judaism, but it's like a cancer. It's a tumor on the Jewish body, and it's causing the entire Jewish body to rot. It is unacceptable. And this was the view shared by all the rabbis around the world, except for a handful of people that were bought by the Zionists, because they were able to acquire people, scholars, but were rotten, like an apple in a barrel of apples has some rotten apples. They were able to glean and gain some people who were ready to sell their souls for the respect and for the money that was offered to them, and they became their rabbis, and they made a big issue of these, the chief rabbis. So today you have a Zionist rabbinate, and their chief rabbis who go around the world and say that they're the chief rabbis of Israel, and people think that means they're representing Judaism. But the truth is, there is another rabbinate in Jerusalem. There is a rabbinate that represents the religious communities that was living there for hundreds of years. Nothing to do with the Israeli rabbinate and their chief rabbis. Their chief rabbis and their rabbinate is a fraud. And therefore, as I say, the very religious communities around the world all stood in opposition to this state, and it has nothing to do with Judaism.
So basically what you're saying is that the Zionist entity and all these Zionists, they took the word of Judaism, they took the text of Judaism, your faith, and they stole it, they Israeled it, you might say, and now are using this to commit a genocide and commit decades upon decades of acts of terror, war crimes, ethnic cleansing, genocide, torture, you name it. And they basically are doing this in your name. How does that make you feel?
And so they have two actually weapons. One weapon, what I call nuclear weapons, is that they claim it's in the name of Judaism, in the name of godliness, that God gave it to the children of Israel, the land of Israel, totally ignoring that the fact that we were sent into exile and were forbidden to make a Jewish state for 2,000 years, but they're using it as a weapon to intimidate and silence anybody who dares to speak up against them, and they gain the Christian support around the world and so forth. So that's one weapon. But the second weapon is even more powerful, is that if anybody dares raise a head and say, why are you doing this to innocent people in Palestine? Or whatever it is, they'll speak up anything, a word against what they're doing to the people in Gaza or in Beirut, they immediately condemn them as being anti-Semitic. So they use that second weapon, a nuclear weapon they use, that they condemn anybody who speaks up against their unjust, their criminal murder and occupation and genocide. They accuse them of being haters of Jews. It's nothing more insulting to us as Jews and harmful and false than this accusation of anti-Semitism. As I've mentioned earlier, my grandparents were killed in Auschwitz. The majority of my parents' families were killed by the Nazis. Millions of Jews were killed by the Nazis. They were anti-Semites. They hated the Jews. The Zionists used the fact that the world was silent and did not stand up to save the Jews, and people have a guilt feeling. They used this concept and the fact that the world is actually trying to assure themselves that it should not happen a second type of such of anti-Semitic attacks or such arbitrary hate of people. Therefore, they make remembrances of the Holocaust and so forth. And it's all that it should not replay itself. Another Nazism, another Hitler. So the Zionists use this sensitive issue, and when anybody dares to speak up against their illegal, immoral occupation, they come and they declare immediately it's anti-Semitism, and people lose their jobs. Professors, we have thousands and tens of thousands of professors and students in the universities who are very smart, intelligent, and open-minded, and they see what's happening, and they're starting to demonstrate in the tens of thousands, thank God. And they're getting fired from the jobs. They're losing their tenures. Professors, the students are getting suspended, and on and on and on. Why? Because they're being accused of anti-Semitism. Like I say, it's such an inappropriate, it's such a wrong, a misuse of the word anti-Semitism, and it's an insult to us as Jews, to my grandparents who died because they were Jewish, because they were served God, and they died for that. And now people are committing a crime, and if you speak up against them, it's referred to as anti-Semitism. That's nothing more insulting to the ashes of my grandparents, and also it totally it diffuses, it makes worthless the word anti-Semitism. In other words, if somebody will truly be an anti-Semite and do something against a Jew, and the Jew will stand up and say, this guy's attacking me because he's an anti-Semite, the world will laugh, because they nullified the power of that word anti-Semitism. It means nothing. They'll say, oh, we heard you already. You're the boy who crowd wolf. We heard what the Zionists, they cry anti-Semitism whenever they commit a crime, if anybody speaks up against them. So they've totally watered down the word anti-Semitism, and it's valueless already. That's what the Zionists is. So it's not only a crime against the Palestinians, it's a crime against the Jews. And the truth, who is the anti-Semites? The personification of anti-Semitism is the Zionists and the state of Israel, because they're killing people. They're brutally attacking the Arabs. They're brutally attacking the Jews, as I've showed you. You see, just like they're spraying them with the stink chemicals to destroy the clothes when they're demonstrating. The attacks go on and on and on in the streets of Jerusalem, 76 years. And so they murder, they attack. So this is ongoing. And so people are being murdered and oppressed and arrested, Jews, because they're standing up for their Judaism, and they're opposing the Zionist state, and they're brutally attacked and killed. So who is anti-Semitic? The Zionists. More than that, even the ones who are dying for their cause, that means the Zionists, for 76 years, you'll go to the cemeteries of their soldiers. How many people died for their cause? So people are shedding blood. There's tens and tens of thousands, and maybe hundreds of thousands of Palestinians who have died because of Zionism, and they've created a rift and a hate between Jews and Muslims, because people don't know to differentiate between Judaism and Zionism, and people, the blood is pouring like rivers of blood of the Palestinians and of Jews, all for this worthless cause, the selfish, flawed, nationalist cause called Zionism. And so who is anti-Semitic? Zionism and the state of Israel. They are the personification of anti-Semitism, and it should be justly so labeled. Unbelievable that the world buys into the Zionist narrative and plays along with them. And if anybody stands up in opposition, they're called anti-Semitic. Now, you ask if it can be successful. As I say, God warned us. If you will rebel against him, it will not be successful. The state of Israel will end, just like we said, the Roman Empire, the Greek Empire, USSR, apartheid. This will end. We just pray to God it should happen without any further suffering and bloodshed, but it will end. And even logically, if you will think about it, they're going into a quagmire, into a tunnel that has no end. Because what is the solution? They're going to throw out every Palestinian from Palestine. Millions of people they're going to throw out. And then even if they, God forbid, let's just say, God forbid, hypothetically, let's just say they could accomplish such a thing, which they can't. What about the people, their relatives? and that children who will be living around the world, they'll forgive and forget? It doesn't work like that. So they can never accomplish this satanic occupation. There's no light at the end of the tunnel. So it's just simply a satanic movement that is selfish, flawed, and ongoing, because God gave Satan powers, and they're being supported by the Western governments. But it will end. We pray to God that it should end speedily with God's compassion, without any more suffering. And therefore we are on the streets, and we are compelled and obligated to go on the streets as we do, in the streets of Jerusalem, in the streets of Canada, in UK, US, wherever we have large Jewish communities, the very religious, and we demonstrate and tell the world that they're being conned, they're being duped. They are supporting a total illegitimate criminal endeavor, an occupation that has no justification, and every minute that is going by is causing another death, another tragedy, another nekba, and we dare not be silent.
Rabbi Weiss, I found our conversation absolutely enlightening, and I think many others will as well, because it's the exact opposite of what we've all been told to believe by the mainstream media and by the Zionists. So, Rabbi, I wish you all the best. God bless you. I'll pray for you, and I hope you have success in your effort to expose the truth to as many people as possible in the future.
God, thank you very much. Keep up your good word. Spread the word. If anybody points and says to you, this is anti-Semitic, say, excuse me, look at the very religious communities who give their lives for their religion. Why is it that these communities are the first and foremost to stand up and oppose the occupation? So it has nothing to do with anti-Semitism. Do not be intimidated. Do not be silent. And more than that, we plead, get the word out to the people in Gaza, in Beirut. Tell them our hearts are with. I got this in Beirut, actually. I went to visit Baja Barajna, one of the camps over there. We went to visit Sabra Shaltila and Baja Barajna, the refugee camps. And they gave me a key that symbolizes their hope to return to the homes in Jerusalem. Let them know that I carry it with me, and our communities around, we are crying and hurting with them. And with God's help, inshallah, we won't be silent until that God, with his mercy, will bring a free Palestine. El Bima Palestine. Send them our message.
Well, I'm sure everyone in the region is going to be watching. Lebanon, Gaza, those who can, those who have access to electricity and internet, who haven't been prevented to see the truth by the Zionist regime. So I'm sure that they will love your message. Thank you so much for joining me today.